So we're going to take a look here at Module 5, and in Module 5 it is extremely important that we understand the idea of trading between nations. So I want to take a first moment to highlight this. Nations are going to trade and specialize in the production of an activity based on their comparative advantage. Whatever they have the ability to produce at a low opportunity cost, that's where they're going to specialize in production, and that's what they're going to make. It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have the ability to produce other goods and services. It just means that they are uniquely qualified to produce that one specific item, and they'll go ahead and make that. Whether in real life, it could be because they have lower labor costs, or they have those natural resources. Those are different reasons. So specialization is just focusing on this production of that specific product, and those countries will then export whatever they are specializing in. Comparative advantage is when a country has that lower opportunity cost. Remember, opportunity cost is how much you have to give up of something in order to get one of something else. So it deals with trade-offs. If your economy can produce olive oil or wine, your workers can't do both at the same time. By producing olive oil, they're giving up the opportunity of producing wine. So there's a trade-off between those things here. Absolute advantage is simply when an economy has the ability to produce more given the same amount of resources. They just can make more of it. They require less physical resources to produce that same amount here. We have examples in here where you have the production of natural gas and oil. We can see that Saudi Arabia and Canada, remember, these are worker hours, so the resources that you're putting in. It's an input example here. Workers' hours to produce 1 unit of natural gas. So it only takes Saudi Arabia and Canada 1 hour to make a unit of natural gas, where it takes Iran 2 units. So in this case, Saudi Arabia and Canada have that absolute advantage over Iran. Iran does not have that absolute advantage. Over here, we can see worker hours to produce 1 unit of oil. In this case, Saudi Arabia and Iran are better at this than Canada. In this case, when we look at opportunity cost here, it's a ratio. So it takes 2 hours to produce natural gas in Iran, and it takes 8 hours in Iran to produce oil. This is a ratio of 1 to 4, a 1-4 ratio. In this example here, we have a 1 to 4 ratio. In Canada, they have a 1 to 10 ratio. In Saudi Arabia, they have a 1 to 8 ratio. We can look at this and say, for these ratios, because Iran only has to give up 1/4 of the natural gas, they should go ahead and produce the oil. But that's kind of a convoluted way. An easier way to look at this is in this third column to say, okay, how many more hours would you need to work in order to produce that natural gas? And in this case, Iran only has to work 6 more hours. So they have a lower opportunity cost in the production of that natural gas. So they're going to want to produce the natural gas. Whereas over here, Saudi Arabia and Canada, they have kind of that absolute advantage of the production of oil. They're going to be the ones, to make the natural gas over here. And then Iran's going to make the oil. So Iran's going to make that oil. Saudi Arabia and Canada, they're going to make the natural gas. You will see questions like this pop up on, similar to that of your exams towards the end. They might have situations where they have multiple countries and they're producing, multiple different things. And I've gone ahead and drawn these out for you. Let's work through them here real quick. So We have Greece, France, and Italy. We have worker hours to produce olive oil, worker hours to produce wine, and that was the data that was given to you. You say, okay, it takes 35 hours in Greece to produce olive oil, and it would take 60 hours in Greece to make some wine. So how many more additional hours to produce the wine instead of olive oil? Say, okay, 25. And in France, they would only need an additional 5 hours to produce the wine instead of the olive oil. And in Italy, there's no difference. In this case, we can conclude that Italy has an absolute advantage in both of these items here. Italy, because they have this, they only takes 30 hours for them to make olive oil. It only takes 30 hours for them to make wine. In this case, Italy, yay, Italy, for both your olive oil and your wine. So in this case, they're great at both of them, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't trade. Italy should definitely specialize in its resources and the production here in wine. They should be making the wine. Italy should definitely make the wine. They don't have anything but a 1-to-1 ratio between these two. Over here in Greece, on the other hand, Greece, they would have to give up a significant amount of olive oil in order to make wine. If they took 60 worker hours to make 1 unit of wine, if they had 60 hours total, they could use that to make olive oil and make almost 2 units of olive oil. Greece should not be making that wine. Instead, Greece should be focusing on the production of your olive oil here. France, on the other hand, is relatively close. It will benefit them to kind of work here. You should definitely see that for the comparative advantage. I'm sorry for that noise. Italy should definitely make the wine. It would make the wine, and then you're going to see for Greece is going to make that olive oil here. And the next example, we gone ahead and just added a few more different countries here, and now we're going to look at lumber versus oil. And we say, okay, what are some of the opportunity costs we can put that here off to the side? And remember, it's just the difference between these two. So to go for Canada is really, really, really good at making lumber here. They have that absolute advantage in making lumber because they don't need more than 5 hours to make a unit of lumber. So they're definitely going to be able to produce that. We say, okay, they would need to add an additional amount of 15 hours, that difference here, to go. So worker hours to produce oil instead of lumber, they need to add another 15 hours. In Russia, it's the same. For them, it really doesn't matter. In Saudi Arabia, it's actually going to be a negative 55. Oh, that's the lowest number we got so far. United States, the difference here is just 5, and in Venezuela, we have that difference of 25. And it's going to drop down here. Because we see this number is significantly lower here, that country is going to want to produce the oil instead of lumber, Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia definitely going to want to make that oil in comparison. Now, when we look at this and we say, okay, it's very obvious that these countries, Canada should make the lumber, Saudi Arabia should make the oil. But how about in comparison to the U.S. here? So the United States, you can say, oh, they can make lumber, but Canada is better off than they are. Russia and Russia is the same, but the United States does have an advantage over Saudi Arabia and Venezuela making the lumber. When we look at oil production, on the other hand, for the United States, it takes us 15 hours to produce the oil, whereas Saudi Arabia, it only takes 5, and in Russia, they only have 10 hours. So in this case, if the United States was trading with just Russia, if it was just a trade between the U.S. and Russia, we can look at this and say, oh, okay, Russia's better at producing oil than the United States is, and we're the same with Russia in regards to lumber. In these trade situations, you say, okay, Russia makes the oil, the United States makes the lumber, and you trade. That's what would occur if you have a situation between the United States and Venezuela. We're much better off with the lumber, and we're the same with oil. So the U.S. would make the lumber here, and Venezuela makes the oil. But those are just some of the examples that you'll have to walk through. Remember, the difference between the two here is kind of like your opportunity cost, what you have to give up. That raw number of how many workers' hours are needed to produce the item, that's going to be your absolute advantage. I hope that helps with you guys, and hope you learned something. Sorry about the noise there.